Look around you. You see them everywhere, but you don't see them. Men who, after decades spent building a life, a career, and relationships, are simply done. Not taking a break, not rebounding from a bad divorce. They are permanently walking away from dating and partnership. And the consensus explanation that they got burned is wrong. The real reason is far more chilling, far more rational, and it's the subject nobody wants to talk about. They didn't leave because of drama, they left because of the math. These are men who finally took out the ledger, sat down, and performed a brutal, precise accounting of their relationships. They calculated the ROI, the return on investment, of their time, their money, their emotional labor, and their peace. And when the numbers came back, they were so lopsided, so massively skewed towards zero return that continuing was not an option. It was financial suicide, it was emotional self-destruction. And once they saw that imbalance clearly, they couldn't unsee it. That clarity is the end of the road. This video is not about bitterness. It's about biological recalibration and brutal pattern recognition. If you are a man who feels invisible when you have nothing, and suddenly useful when she has no other options, or if you're pouring $1 million of effort into a partnership that returns 5 cents, this is the video that will confirm your deepest, most uncomfortable truth. Before we dive into the staggering numbers, the biological factors, and the 3 shocking items on the What She Contributed list, hit the like button if this subject already resonates with you, and subscribe to Famiora Vision so you don't miss our next deep dive into modern relationship dynamics. You need to see this to understand why your peace is non-negotiable. The foundation of this mass exodus is a simple, undeniable equation. I gave everything. I received nothing of substance in return. This statement isn't a hyperbolic complaint. It is a clinical summary of a decades-long pattern that only becomes visible with age. For men in their 30s and 40s, this imbalance is often masked by the biological imperative to partner. But as they hit their 50s and 60s, a devastating clarity emerges, forcing an exit. Let's trace the arc of this visibility. Think back to when you were in your prime building years, your late 30s, early 40s. You were diligently establishing your career, accumulating resources, and cultivating the emotional maturity required to be a stable partner. But women in their prime, specifically those in their late 20s and early 30s, were largely disinterested. You represented stability, security, and predictability. In short, you were the safe option, and safe was universally labeled as boring. They were chasing the edge, the charismatic, high-potential but often chaotic man. When you tried to approach them, the rejection was immediate. You're too old, we're in different life stages, or I need excitement. The message was clear and constant. You were not enough. You accepted this narrative, focused on women your own age, and committed to pouring every ounce of effort into those relationships, believing that your value would eventually be recognized. The profound irony here is that you weren't truly invisible because you lacked value. You were invisible because your value, stability, reliability, the capacity for true partnership, had not yet become sexy. Women were still prioritizing the thrilling chaos of potential over the peaceful security you offered. You internalized the rejection, watching women choose instability and drama, and you thought, perhaps my time will come later. Well, later has arrived. Fast forward 20 years. You are now in your 50s or 60s. You might be grayer, perhaps less physically vigorous, but you are financially established, emotionally disciplined, and possess a life built through decades of effort. Suddenly, the women who wouldn't give you a second glance 2 decades ago are highly interested. They're reaching out, not just women your age, but often women 10 or 15 years younger. The internal shock is palpable. Why now? I'm objectively older and less imposing. What changed? The answer is the most uncomfortable truth of this entire dynamic. Nothing about you changed. What changed is her needs. In her past, She needed excitement. Now, she desperately needs stability. Back then, you weren't useful to her mission. Now, you are a critical resource. The gut punch realization for men is that being wanted solely because you have become useful does not feel like being wanted at all. It feels like being settled for, like a functional replacement for missed opportunities. You went from not good enough to good enough for now. This awakening, that you were ignored when she had abundance and pursued only when her options narrowed, is the first catastrophic crack in the relationship foundation. It triggers the essential question: after decades of giving everything, what did I actually get in return? Relationships, stripped of romantic narrative, are complex investments. You invest capital, time, money, energy, and relentless emotional labor. In any investment, you expect a reasonable return on investment, ROI. The horrifying math most men avoid until it's too late is the literal accounting of this ROI. Let's quantify it conservatively. If you worked 40 to 60 hours a week for 30 years, earning an average of $60,000 annually, your gross income is $1.8 million. If 70% of that income went towards funding the joint lifestyle, mortgage, bills, household maintenance, vacations, and securing the life she wanted, that is $1.26 million of your earnings. What was her financial contribution? Often, it was discretionary income. Even if she worked, the responsibility for the obligations, the non-negotiable financial pillars, was almost always yours. You invested $1.26 million. She invested perhaps $200,000. That is a 6-to-1 financial ratio, and that's being generous. The partnership begins with the primary financial burden, and thus the stress, residing squarely on your shoulders. But money is only part of the story. The real black hole is emotional labor. For decades, you acted as the primary emotional stabilizer. You de-escalated her stress, managed her moods, and absorbed the conflicts she initiated. Estimate 10 minutes a day dedicated solely to emotional management, calming, listening, fixing. Over 30 years, that equates to 1,825 hours. That is literally a full-time job for an entire year. Now, invert the scenario. How much emotional support did you receive when you were stressed, struggling, or facing a crisis? How often did she actively, compassionately, and consistently show up for you? For many men, the return is less than 10% of what they gave. You gave 1,825 hours. You received 182 back. This imbalance of labor is the most exhausting realization. Consider the major life decisions: where you lived, how free time was spent, holiday choices. For the majority of men who walk away, 80% of major life decisions were ultimately tilted to accommodate her preferences, her desires, or her comfort. In any sane business model, an investment is expected to appreciate over 30 years. The partnership should become more valuable, more aligned, and more fulfilling. Instead, for these men, the relationship depreciated. Year 10 was worse than year 5. Year 20 was a wasteland compared to year 10. No rational investor continues to pour millions into a consistently depreciating, low-return asset. Yet, men do it for decades, falsely believing this destructive dynamic is synonymous with love. What they are actually doing is subsidizing a comfortable life for someone else, while their own peace and identity are slowly dissolving. The math dictates an exit. The mathematical realization transitions rapidly into the psychological and anecdotal evidence, solidifying the choice to walk away. Take the case of Robert, a 57-year-old man who ended a 32-year marriage. 6 months post-divorce, he presented a piece of paper, worn from being continually consulted, listing 2 columns: what I brought and what she brought. The left column, what I brought, was a densely detailed, single-spaced list of 43 items: income generation, primary emotional stability, managing household crises, maintaining the relationship with extended family, planning for the children's future, handling all major repairs, and financial management. It was exhaustive. The right column, what she brought, contained exactly 3 items. Robert was not being bitter. He was being meticulously honest. He gave his ex-wife credit for every contribution he could rationally assign. The 3 items were: she cooked dinner most nights, she handled the house decor, and she organized social events. Meals, aesthetics, and social coordination. That was the entirety of her active contribution over 3 decades. Everything else, the income, the stress absorption, the conflict resolution, the emotional regulation, the infrastructure of their shared life, was his burden alone. Staring at that list, Robert realized he hadn't been in a partnership. He had been in a one-person company, solely responsible for the operational success and emotional solvency of the venture. This exercise, which many men who choose to opt out undertake, consistently yields a similar, brutal ratio. The man brings 30, 40, or 50 items. The woman brings 3 to 5. When these men analyze what their partner actually contributed beyond the mere fact of her existence, the list evaporates. She didn't manage stress, she created it, and then expected him to resolve it. She didn't provide emotional support. She was a net consumer of his emotional energy. She didn't compromise. She expected accommodation and expected him to carry the mental load of the household, the social calendar, and the financial future. Her contribution was her presence, and the unstated, long-accepted delusion was that her mere presence was contribution enough to justify the millions in time and resources he poured in. She lived in the house he paid for, enjoyed the stability he created, and benefited from the life he designed. But contribution, active, equitable participation in building and maintaining the shared structure, was minimal. The most painful realization is that she likely believed, in her own narrative, that she was giving just as much, because her presence was her currency. It was a massive psychological disconnect. This pattern of chronic imbalance eventually hits a biological threshold in men, a factor few people understand. The willingness of men to tolerate one-sided, high-cost relationships is not purely cultural. It is hardwired, primarily driven by hormones. In his 20s and 30s, a man's high testosterone T levels don't just fuel sex drive, they fuel the tolerance for unfavorable terms. High T makes men more competitive, more willing to chase, and more accepting of drama and imbalance in exchange for partnership and the promise of a future. Biologically, the mandate is to secure a partner, and the high T levels provide the necessary tolerance to absorb the financial and emotional costs. But as men age, this dynamic shifts radically. Testosterone declines by approximately 1% per year after the age of 30. By the time a man is in his 50s or 60s, his T levels can be 30 to 40% lower than his peak. Critically, when testosterone drops, the tolerance for one-sided relationships drops right along with it. The man ceases to be willing to chase, to tolerate drama, or to continually invest in a negative return scenario. This isn't bitterness. It is the biological cost-benefit analysis recalibrating. The exact same relationship dynamic that was merely tolerable at 30 becomes utterly intolerable at 55. His brain has literally reset the boundary of what is acceptable and sustainable. Compounding this is the insidious effect of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Long-term relationships defined by constant conflict diffusion and emotional management, always being the one to calm, fix, and regulate her moods, keep cortisol chronically elevated. This state of constant low-level emotional warfare is toxic. Chronic high cortisol destroys sleep quality, fuels systemic inflammation, accelerates the aging process, raises blood pressure, and severely impairs cognitive function. It is a biological certainty that this dynamic actively shortens his lifespan. As men age, they become profoundly more sensitive to the destructive effects of cortisol. The stress that he could manage at 35 he realizes is actively killing him at 55. His body starts shouting a survival command: get out. This is not weakness or giving up. It is the survival instinct finally overriding years of social programming that told him he had to sacrifice his well-being for the partnership. Finally, there is the maturation of the prefrontal cortex, PFC, the brain region responsible for long-term planning, critical judgment, and crucially, pattern recognition. The PFC doesn't fully mature until a person's late 40s or early 50s. In his younger years, the man is biologically handicapped in his ability to see long-term destructive patterns. He is present-focused, perpetually optimistic, and wired to believe that it will get better if he just tries harder. By his 50s, his PFC is fully developed, and the data is irrefutable. He looks back at 30 years of evidence, the financial costs, the emotional deficit, the constant depreciation, and his fully functional, rational brain delivers a clear, evidence-based verdict. Based on this pattern, future outcomes are predictably unfavorable. The only rational command is exit. Walking away at this stage is not giving up on love. It is the brain finally functioning optimally and refusing to repeat a recognized destructive failure loop. The convergence of biological recalibration and rational accounting leads inevitably to a single critical moment: the crystallization of clarity. This is the specific instance where everything a man has been rationalizing, ignoring, and suppressing snaps into perfect, undeniable focus. It is the moment the denial ends and reality takes over. For many, this moment involves a sudden, jarring awareness of their home environment. Consider David, a man who, for months, would sit in his car in the driveway for 15 or 20 minutes after work, engine off. When his neighbor finally asked if he was all right, David simply responded, "Yeah, just enjoying the quiet." The admission itself was the trigger. He realized with devastating force that the metal box parked in his driveway, a confined, impersonal space, was a place of deeper peace, rest, and refuge than the house he had spent decades funding, maintaining, and protecting. His sanctuary had become his source of stress, the place he actively dreaded entering. Once you recognize that the home you built is the place you actively try to avoid, the foundation is gone. You cannot unknow that truth. For others, the moment of clarity arrives during a crisis event, which acts as a ruthless litmus test of the partnership. You face a real-world disaster, a job loss, a major health scare, the death of a parent. You desperately need support, empathy, and the validation of a partner who shows up. Instead of genuine compassion, you are met with annoyance. She is irritated because your problem, your grief, your financial stress, your vulnerability has disrupted her life. You are reeling from the loss of your father, and she is frustrated that you are not emotionally available to regulate her moods. You are facing financial uncertainty, and she is upset that the scheduled vacation might be canceled. In that moment of profound need, the truth is exposed. She is not a partner. Partners absorb crisis together. She only shows up when it is convenient, easy, and requires minimal emotional expenditure. She views your suffering not as a shared challenge, but as a personal inconvenience. A third, brutally common catalyst is overhearing the contempt. The man accidentally overhears his partner speaking about him to her friends. It is not playful teasing or light venting. It is pure, unadulterated contempt. She discusses him as a burden she tolerates, a necessary obstacle, or a source of frustration that inhibits her happiness. He realizes in a single painful flash that she doesn't actually like him. She is with him for the utility, the provision, and the security he provides, not for the person he is. The utility is valued, the man is despised. For one 62-year-old man, the moment was simpler yet profound. He was sitting across from his wife at a restaurant, watching another couple genuinely talk, laugh, and connect. He looked at his own relationship and felt nothing. No warmth, no connection, no desire to engage. After 40 years, he realized, I don't have that. I've never had that. If there is no connection, no desire, and no positive emotional return, the point of staying collapses entirely. Whatever the trigger, dramatic or quiet, that moment marks the end of denial, which was the only remaining thread holding the relationship together. This clarity then informs the man's perspective on the modern dating market, especially concerning women seeking older, established men. The imbalance he observed in his marriage is now openly quantified and marketed in the dating world. The demand list from these women is gargantuan: complete financial security, access to already built wealth, not interested in building wealth together, absolute emotional stability, the man must be the perpetually zen rock, and total flexibility around her schedule, friends, and lifestyle. He is expected to enhance her existing life without requiring her to adjust her own. They demand constant validation, engagement with their problems, and unwavering support. The offer list in return is minimalist: companionship, her presence in his space, perhaps some household chores, but not the mental load of management, and maybe sex, under specific conditions of convenience and low stress. This profound imbalance is not hidden, it's advertised. Dating analytics confirm that women over 40 searching for men 10 to 20 years older include income and financial stability as a filter 73% of the time. Yet when asked what they bring financially, only 12% mention contributing to the wealth. The men who have walked away have learned that the modern deal is simply the old deal made visible and quantified. Massive demands for minimal contribution. They have already paid the cost of that terrible ROI once, and they are rationally refusing to enter that failed investment again. The offered companionship is not compelling enough to justify the price, the required peace, autonomy, and security they have finally reclaimed. The decision to walk away is not a fit of pique or an emotional retreat. It is the culmination of years of data processing, resulting in a psychological transformation that is functionally irreversible. When a man finally leaves a one-sided dynamic, his brain initiates what is known as cognitive restructuring. The neural pathways that enabled the tolerance, the rationalizations, and the chronic hope, the pathways that kept him saying, "I just need to try harder," are actively pruned and dissolve. This is similar to recovery from addiction. The old self-destructive patterns must be replaced by new, healthy ones. The new neural reality dictates, I will not tolerate this imbalance, and crucially, my peace is non-negotiable. Once these new, healthier patterns solidify, a process that takes significant time, they become the default setting. His restructured brain will fiercely protect this new, hard-won peace, making any return to the old, toxic dynamic neurologically impossible. Furthermore, walking away necessitates identity consolidation. For decades, his identity was tied to being the provider, the partner, the one who perpetually sacrifices. The exit required destroying that identity and building a new one, a man who prioritizes his own well-being, establishes firm boundaries, and values his autonomy above external obligation. This new identity, built on self-respect and rationality, is inherently stronger than the old one, which was based on obligation and chronic subsidy. Psychologically, attempting to return to the subservient role would require demolishing the healthier identity he fought to build. The brain, now operating on self-preservation, protects this state of wholeness. When people ask why he won't reconsider, the answer is neuroscience. He can't go back because his brain is actively preventing him from regressing to a less aware, less healthy version of himself. This transformation is why the resulting judgment from others is so easy to ignore. The married friends who call him bitter are simply utilizing cognitive dissonance reduction. His freedom is a direct, uncomfortable reflection of their own captivity. To avoid questioning their own choices, they attack his rationality. His family judges him because his choice to prioritize self over obligation threatens the established social contract of male sacrifice. Women judge him because his refusal to accept unfavorable terms threatens the entire transactional dynamic they rely on. They call his choice pathology, selfish, damaged, broken, to avoid acknowledging that his action is pure rationality. His freedom makes them uncomfortable, but their discomfort is irrelevant. He is not bitter, he has clarity. He is not damaged, he is healing and setting boundaries. He is not selfish, he is practicing self-preservation. He is not broken, he is whole, living a life that finally respects his contributions. The investment failed decades ago, the ROI was negative, and he has finally liquidated the depreciating asset. He learned, he adapted, he protected himself. This is a quiet, evidence-based, completely justified victory.